Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Laprie.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, episode number 11. I'm your host, Kim Laprie from teachersneedteachers.com, a coaching and community site for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years, but actually thrive. Thanks for coming and hanging out today. I have an awesome episode because I love you guys so much. Today, I have an amazing guest, Scott Schwartz, who is an administrator in the Deerfield Public School District in Illinois. He was previously principal at Walden Elementary and has recently been promoted to assistant superintendent for teaching, learning, and innovation in his district. This interview became surprisingly awesome as I learned that the entire kindergarten through 8 district uses standards-based grading, which I personally use and am a proponent and supporter of. Scott and I definitely talk about grading and teaching philosophy, as well as the database hiring system his district uses to find the best teachers. You definitely want to listen to this episode for the interview questions and feedback Scott provides. Here's my conversation with Scott. Tell me about your teaching experience and how you came to your current position.
So I have worked in the community that I'm working in now for my entire career. I've been incredibly lucky in that regard. I started as a 7th grade social studies teacher, and I did that for 4 years. I taught world geography. It included things like religions, world religions, political systems, economic systems, and it was awesome. It was a really great gig. I did during that time when I was teaching, I went back for my master's degree, and I was very fortunate and lucky enough to get an assistant principalship in that same school.
Wow.
I did that for 3 years. And then same thing, very lucky, very fortunate to have an opportunity to take on a principalship of a K-5 building in the same district. And I'm wrapping up my 8th year in that role now. And starting July 1st, which is, starting next week, I'm going to become the assistant superintendent for teaching, learning, and innovation.
And what does that mean, teaching, learning, and innovation? How do you see yourself in terms of what the role was created for and maybe how you might change that role in terms of your own philosophy?
So, we're pretty progressive here in Deerfield. And so I think a more traditional title for this role would be, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. So I like the wording that we use. It's teaching, learning, and innovation. So, I'm responsible for all of the, for example, digital resources that our teachers have access to for the kids. We are a 1-to-1 school district. So all of our K1 kids have iPads. Our 2 through 8 kids have Chromebooks. And so it's a really important part of my job to determine which resources are going to be best for our kids, making sure I'm listening to teachers, and getting their input on what they see as the best digital resource for the kids to increase learning and maximize the learning that takes place. I would also be responsible, assessment would be under my umbrella. And so I'm working with my team and the staff here. It's an incredible staff on, how do we, not only which assessments we give, but how frequently, and then, of course, analyzing the data to determine the best course of action to help our kids. And
so under that title, I really love the word innovation that you have there. And to me, the word innovation also implies changing the way that we do business, that we're growing and allowing ourselves to change with what's happening in the real world and maybe abandoning antiquated ways. How have you had to work, especially as a principal, had to work with your staff, especially those who sort of were stuck in maybe some old ways of thinking in terms of teaching?
Well, one of the things that we did, we're going into our 3rd or 4th year already, but we became a standards-based learning and grading district.
Awesome.
And so we were at the forefront when it happened. And we've had missteps along the way, and we've all been on a pretty large learning curve. But I think that's a pretty direct answer to your question, because if you think about going from a traditional grading system where you're collecting averages to a standards-based system where you're really focused on the extent to mastery of standards, that in of itself is pretty innovative, and it really forces that hand a bit on the type of learning environment that our kids need and that we know is best practice.
About 5 years ago, started moving towards standards-based grading, and I personally think that the elementary school teachers have it down.
Correct.
Everything that they do is standards-based, and it's actually because of my daughter's report card that made me think, you know what, we're doing this wrong at the secondary level. We need to be thinking more about the skills that they can apply in multiple situations. How are they mastering those skills as opposed to checking off every single standard? And it's been difficult for me to wrap my brain around it, but now I can't imagine teaching any other way, but trying to spread that with my other colleagues who love to use points or, a point for participation. How were you able to get everyone to get into that mindset, especially knowing, you as a former secondary teacher, knowing that people love their points and averages because it just seems to make sense for them?
There is truth to the fact that the transition was a little simpler at the elementary level. And at the middle school level, we're a K-8 district. So at the middle school, there was definitely some additional challenges. The reality is our staff here is incredible, and they persevere and they're willing to learn and grow. And no one was fighting it necessarily. We just had to make sure we were supporting staff on particular questions. Like, for example, here's an ongoing conversation. If I'm a 7th grade math teacher, but I teach an advanced level class, let's say I'm teaching 8th and 9th grade standards on a regular basis, do I grade and score on a 1, 2, 3, 4 standards-based system based on 7th grade standards or on how that child is doing on the 8th and 9th grade standards that I'm teaching them? So right there, those are questions that we've had to kind of work through, and there's just differing opinions. And so we've had to just do our research and figure out best ways to support staff through things like that.
In terms of the demographic in your community, because I wanted to get a picture of the community that you serve. Could you just tell us a little more about the types of students that are in your school in terms of like maybe socioeconomic status or, the culture, the type of environment there?
Sure. So Deerfield is about 25 miles north of Chicago. It's a pretty affluent community. We do have a few Title I schools, but our overall low income percentage is less than 1%. We're about 86% white. And then the remaining 14% is Hispanic, Asian, some biracial students, some African American students, but we're overall an incredible community with very supportive parents, families. We have, it's definitely suburban, right? It's definitely suburban. We've got corporations like Walgreens, that's headquartered in Deerfield. And just moved here last year, is a pretty big construction company, and so there's definitely businesses and industries that are interested in moving here because it's a really great place to have a business and have a corporation.
And then now I know that you are going to be working with the elementary and the middle schools since you're assistant superintendent. Now, do your schools tend to be more like a year-round schedule or a traditional schedule? What is the structure of that in the schools?
Very traditional. We go from just before Labor Day. We start at the end of August, and we go till the first or second week of June, depending on the year. We've got to go year round, there would be a lot of coordination, right? We've got a very strong park district in Deerfield who runs the camps. That would have to be all altered. And right now we're still on a very traditional schedule.
So I'm really intrigued with the standards-based grading in your entire district. To me, that's my dream. Now, if a new teacher comes in who doesn't have that experience, because most of us, especially the new teachers coming out, we're just used to the regular grading system. The new teachers were around during, the NCLB, and so, everything was about testing. How do you orient them in terms of this new grading philosophy?
So we have a new teacher orientation at the beginning of the year, and so we definitely provide some of the basics at the beginning of the year for our new teachers. But the truth is, our new teachers coming out of college and university, this is how they're trained. So wow. It's actually less of a transition for some of our new teachers as it is for more of our veteran teachers who graded for many years in an older system.
Okay. And so when you are hiring, especially someone who's a veteran teacher from maybe outside of the district, are you very clear about that in the interview process about the way that you grade?
So we would be looking at fit. I know that some of your questions coming up are going to be on our hiring practices, but so I could talk much more about this if you want. But we have screeners that identify talent, and then the following rounds, whatever that might look like, are going to be for fit. And so certainly, if as a part of fit, is we would have to have a teacher, and we would only offer a position to a teacher who is comfortable or philosophically aligned with the standards-based learning environment.
Right. I can see how that would be essential, especially since there's complete buy-in in your district.
Right.
You can't have an outlier who is going to fight it. I don't know how much autonomy the teachers in your district have in terms of grading. Is it just something that's been institutionalized, or was there resistance?
We spent a lot of time prioritizing the Common Core standards. Illinois is a Common Core standard state. And so what we did is we had some philosophical conversations about what do we want our progress report to look like. And so in the end, because some schools do have every standard listed and teachers have a mark on every single standard, what we did is we condensed that. And we basically said, here are the most significant standards that we're teaching in this trimester or in this quarter. And if having that worked out as a district helped the entire organization, kind of really begin with the end in mind, and we're able to work backward from there.
Are you using a particular software to do this, or grading program?
Right now we're kind of leaning toward Google. A lot of our teachers are using Google Classroom, and
awesome.
They seem to have success with that.
I think especially because Google is free and there's such a knowledge base out there that it's easy for a teacher to sort of just pick it up on their own, even without any kind of formal training, and it's fairly user friendly. So I can see why they would use that.
It's user friendly, and then when you add in things like Seesaw, are you familiar with Seesaw?
I'm not. I'm intrigued.
Oh, Seesaw is an amazing tool for a variety of reasons. Right now, we're using it at our K-5 level, and we're working on and we're discussing it with our middle school staff on implementing it at the 6-8 level. But Seesaw is the easiest way to explain it. It's a tool. It's a tool that allows us to post assignments or have the students post video, for example, on something that they're working on, and then that serves multiple purposes. Number one is it's a formative assessment tool for the teacher. They can ask kids to videotape themselves working out a math problem, for example. It then gets posted to their page. The teacher later can review that to see, did they master that standard or not? Where do I need to work with them on? It's also a communication tool, because when that gets posted, the parents have access to it. And so parents can see, they have eyes on the classroom. They can see what their children are learning in school. They can see how they're doing, and it really opens up lines of communication with our parents. The third benefit that I love to highlight about Seesaw is that it's structured a little bit like a social media website. So on Facebook and on Instagram, for example, you can like pictures and like posts and of course comment on them. So you could do that with Seesaw as well. So, we actually like to bring in the growth mindset philosophy when we work with our parents on the type of comment that we would love to see them make. We'll ask our parents, to highlight the effort and really praise the hard work that the student looked like they did on that particular assignment, rather than being smart, right? The kind of the classic growth mindset philosophy. So Seesaw is a great tool and really something that I highly recommend other teachers look into.
Just out of curiosity, is that a paid system?
It's there is a free version, but the paid version has benefits, so we pay for it. Okay. One of the benefits is that the posts that are put up for the year, they move with the child K8. Oh. So if you use it K8, or in our case right now we're using K5, over the course of many years, you create a digital portfolio of yourself that you'll always have access to.
And you can see your growth.
You can see your growth. Teachers can look back at last year or the year before to say, let me see what they were doing last year. Let me see where they were. Let me see how they think. It's pretty neat.
I love that. And I really like how you're having parents leave comments based on growth mindset, because I think I work, with seventh graders, and this is the time when their parents really start to get nitpicky about grades. And as one of the few teachers at my site that uses standards-based grading, it's really hard to sort of train the parents to step away from that. And I try to tell them that in 7th grade and 8th grade here, because that's middle school, this is actually the time when they should be stumbling. This is the time when, if you really care about grades, this is the time when they should be getting maybe not the most stellar grades, because they are failing and trying, succeeding, so that when it counts in high school, they would have worked out all the systems so they can be more successful in high school.
Well, yeah, consequences are low, right? You're right. This should be the time where students make mistakes and fail and learn from that, and then move on from there. The other thing I think about when you were speaking about that situation is our schools should not be run and should not look like they did when we as parents went to school. No. And so there is, the term that we use in our district is that that we have to help our parents unlearn. We have to help our parents unlearn the way school should be. So homework is another good example. We know for a fact from educational research, this is unequivocal, that homework does not increase student achievement. Right. But me included, as a student and many of our parents, they went to school and you got homework and never stopped to ask why, but we got homework, and now there's this expectation that our teachers give homework. We have teachers that are starting to not give homework, and it's interesting because it's about a 50-50 split. A lot of our parents are absolutely thrilled by that because oftentimes it's a nightly fight with their child to get their homework done, or the child is so busy with other activities, they get home at 9 o'clock and now they have to start their homework. So there's half the families are thrilled about it, and then half the families are upset about that because this is no disrespect, but they just feel that that's a part of going to school. Right. And so we have to help those parents unlearn the way schools should be run. And to get back to your point, grading, it falls under that umbrella as well. Giving an extra credit assignment that's a word search, and then allowing those points to go into the child's grade, it does not indicate anything about how much they have learned or how many standards they've mastered,
or even extra credit at all.
Well, of course,
I don't like to pad my grades in any way, and I will get students who come and ask for extra credit, and I always invite them to redo a previous assignment if they really want to bring up their grade. I think that revisions are important, especially in writing, and rarely do they take me up on that. They want the extra credit. They want the additional assignment, which is funny to me. Well, back with the parents, I think that especially when it comes to homework, for me, I can't control what happens once a student leaves my classroom. Some of them, especially in the demographic in which I work, they don't have parents at home. Their parents are working a second job, or they have to babysit their younger brother or sister. And I feel that it would be unethical for me to penalize them when they're doing something like that, or if they have no support at home for not doing their homework. We can't expect a 12 or 13-year-old to be resilient enough and motivated enough to do homework as opposed to playing, Fortnite.
Right. Well, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. You might have the smartest kid in your class who has those circumstances where he's babysitting his little brother because his mom and dad are working and he doesn't give his homework. Are you going to give that child a B, C, or D, or F on a report card when he or she is really smart and absolutely understands the standards? At the end of the day, a progress report is a communication tool, and reporting out on the extent by which the student has mastered standards is better communication than A, B, C, D, F, even though that's what our parents understand.
Right.
And that's what our parents are used to.
And that's also goes along the line with penalizing for the timeliness of assignments. I'm not a big believer in grading students based on their time management skills when they're 12.
Right. Or you alluded to this, but who actually did the assignment?
Oh, yeah, right.
I mean, if mom or dad sat down and essentially did all the math problems, well, and it's also a waste of time, right? Because if I clearly understand a math standard, fill in the blank on any one you want, but my homework that night is to do 1 through 50 odd, it makes no sense because I have to do 25 questions. I've already proven to you that I understand that standard, yet I still have to do it. And at the same time, there's someone else in the class who really struggles with that standard, and they're going to go home and they're going to struggle for potentially hours doing math problems that are hard for them. So the expectation here in Deerfield is that if there is something, or whatever the expectation is, if it is at home, call it homework, is that it's purposeful and it's strategically given based on the child's needs.
Right. Okay, so I do want to talk about the hiring process because my listeners are brand new teachers or they're about to be a teacher and they're trying to look for a job. So if they were coming to your city and your district and they wanted to apply, what would you be looking for if you were on the hiring committee? Or what is the process? You had mentioned something about it sounded almost like a vetting process. Could you explain that to me?
Sure. So it's a pretty extensive process. And the way I'd sum it up is that it's very scientific, which is very unique because most hiring systems are based on a gut feeling approach. And they're frankly based on the wrong, or emphasis is placed on the wrong thing. So let me explain. 2 things that you would get from a resume would be someone's experience and their education. Right? Education and experience. And oftentimes districts prioritize those 2 things. Is they look at someone's master's degree in reading and they value that, or they look at someone's 5 years of experience at a different school and they value that. And not to say that those things aren't important, but is that going to automatically equate to maximizing student achievement in that teacher's classroom if you happen to hire them?
Right.
It might, but it also doesn't guarantee it. So what my district does is we bring science into it. We partner with a firm called HumanX. It's an excellent firm out of Lincoln, Nebraska. They also have a headquarters in Kalamazoo, Michigan. But HumanX is a firm that we partner with, and they have done the research and created phone screeners that seek out talent, which is going to be the innate, consistent patterns of thought of the candidates. We have a method now of identifying the innate beliefs, the core values of these candidates, and then again their consistent patterns of thought. That allows us to make a much higher prediction about that candidate's success rate if we end up hiring them or when we end up hiring them.
So if I apply, I'm going to go through a phone screening first.
So when you apply, you're going to complete the online application. That's standard. But what we have as a part of our application online is what we call a student profile builder. And it asks a variety of questions. I think it's 44 questions. I think that's the updated version. And they're timed. It's a timed, I think it's a 44 question screener. And it asks a variety of different questions from within all aspects of education. So things about student discipline, things about parent communication, things about collegiality, things about your drives and values, things about how your work style, how flexible are you, things like that. And at the end of that, we get a student-centered score and a teacher-centered score. Mm-hmm. So that's actually the first thing we look at. And I'll go back to the science behind it. We're looking for candidates that have a high student-centered score and a low teacher-centered score.
Right.
From there, we identify the candidates that we want to screen. It's a phone screener, so we minimize any bias, or we limit any bias that might exist if you're seeing someone in person. I have no idea what they look like, if but it's really important because all I'm interested in is listening to their words. I'm listening to the answers they're giving to a strategic set of questions. And then from there, people that do well on that screener are recommended for the next rounds. And then the next rounds, I can go into that later if you want to ask more questions about this.
Mm-hmm. Now, as I'm listening to this process, I'm wondering, do you still get a large number of applicants considering all the hoops that they have to jump through?
Well, they don't necessarily know the hoops they have to jump through. The answer is yes, we get a lot of candidates.
Okay.
We're what you would call a destination district. It's a very good community. We've got a lot of resources. Like I mentioned, pretty affluent community, and the local tax base provides the majority of our funding.
Okay.
And so we'll get 300 or 400 applicants for every position. They don't necessarily know the steps that they have to go through after that initial application,
right?
But they're all willing to do it, because they want a job.
And I can only imagine that then you're getting the perfect fit for each school, or a near perfect fit for each school.
The fit component would be the last few rounds of our interview process.
Right.
So if the first round is that the application, so we do a review of the application, we're looking at their background, we're looking at their student-centered and teacher-centered scores. Mm-hmm. If that's the first round, the second round is the phone screener. At this point, we're not looking for fit. We're really only looking for talent.
Okay.
We're looking for talent, people that are predictive of excellence. Because at the end of the day, what we like to think about is how many of your teachers, K-12, were excellent, awe-inspiring, the best ever. If you have an average of 80 teachers, K-12, the answer might be one or two. And so our thinking is we want to hire that excellent, awe-inspiring, best ever teacher every single time we have a vacancy. Because as a principal, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing that I can do. I'm busy. Principals have a lot on their plate, but I would be hard-pressed to find something more important than the decisions you make about the teachers that you put into your classrooms, because the teachers are the ones that have the direct impact on kids. Can I share one more piece of science, though, behind our thinking?
I'm definitely fascinated with how you guys do this.
The screener we use is based off of 50 years of research, and it's influenced by personality theories that come from like industrial, organizational, and psychological research. And at the end of the day, like I mentioned, it finds and predicts excellence, right? So we asked this screener, and then the personality traits that we're looking for, these are the 5. You have conscientiousness, and you can imagine, you could probably agree that the people that have these personality traits are the type of teachers you want working in your building.
Right.
Or that you want to be working with as a teacher. So number 1, they're conscientious. Number 2, they're agreeable. And that's on a spectrum. So conscientiousness to not conscientious to not conscientious, or agreeable to disagreeable. Research and science would tell you that those are the 2 most important personality traits when determining an employee's success. That's not just teachers, any employer, any industry.
Okay.
After that, you've got 3 more, which is open-mindedness. And again, on that spectrum to close-mindedness, you have emotional stability to emotional instability. And again, just think about that. If you end up hiring a teacher who's emotionally unstable, that's not good for kids.
Right.
That's not good for collegiality, the culture of the building, the climate of the building. So, and then the last one would be extroversion versus introversion. And people tend to have a hard time with that one because there's a lot of candidates who say, well, wait a minute, I'm pretty introverted. Does that mean I'm not? Does that mean that I wouldn't make a good teacher? Mm-hmm. And the answer is no, not at all. The way I think about introversion is to a flaw, to a fault, where it is you are so introverted that you can't even interact and communicate with other humans because you've got such social anxiety. right?
Right.
And versus extroversion, it's the same thing. On one end of the spectrum, it doesn't mean that that we're only hiring people that are the life of the party. That's not at all what we're saying. What we're saying is, we want to hire people that know how to work with kids, obviously, but also work with parents, work with staff, work with administration. So those 5 things. So now the next step, again, going back to the science, is that when we can identify using the screener, we can seek out talent and we can seek out candidates who are predictive of excellence. That's 50% of the pie. And this is based on research. That's 50% of the pie. That's 50%. Someone's talent, someone's innate core beliefs makes up 50% of the amount of success that candidate will eventually bring to that job. 25% is fit. So you had alluded to this earlier. So after we seek out candidates that are predictive of excellence, we are then looking for fit. Are you going to work? Would you work here at our school, Deerfield District 109, more specifically Walden Elementary School, more specifically the 3rd grade team? Right. Every team has a different feel. Every school has a different feel. And so that's 25%. The remaining 25% is split up evenly, 12.5% education and 12.5% experience. So what that's indicating is that education and experience do matter, but they don't matter as much as talent and fit.
Okay.
That is some of the research behind the decision making that we use in our hiring decisions.
And I think that makes it a little more objective, it seems like, especially because when I've interviewed people, it's, yes, I can go on my gut feeling, but my gut feeling has been wrong. And maybe someone either put on a good show or they couldn't show their personality because of nervousness. Yep. And so we didn't get to really see them shine during that time. So it sounds like it leaves very little to chance in terms of that type of an error.
Well, that's exactly right. And candidates they're always they're still going to be nervous, and sometimes their personality doesn't come out. But we have a deeper understanding of who they are as a person before we even meet them in person. And so, as a principal, in theory, I still have an opinion, and the decision still has to lie with the principal. But in theory, if I bring 4 candidates to the table, they're all predictive of excellence. They've all been through these initial screeners. And I can really rely on my teacher input teams to say, who would you like to work with? Because I know that whichever 4 of those candidates we choose, when they're in a situation in the classroom next year, after the year starts, they're going to probably, very likely, handle that situation correctly. Right. So as a principal, I can't be with the new teacher 24/7. Right. Of course, I'm going to support them. I'm going to be their cheerleader, and I'm going to help them and coach and mentor and do everything I have to do for them. But I can't be there 24/7. So they're going to get that parent email that challenges a decision that they made. I have a tool that allows me to know that the person we hire is going to handle that situation properly. Right. Versus the teacher who either I have no idea or they're going to handle it poorly. Right. I'd rather have a system in place that I can hire a teacher and I can know, because this is their innate, deep-rooted beliefs at their core, that they're going to handle that properly. They're going to listen to the parent, and they're going to try to, they're going to problem solve together, and they're going to work together in effort, in support of the student. Right. It
just comes It comes naturally to them. It's not something you have to teach them to do.
Exactly. Kim, you just said it. The innate core beliefs, you can't teach. I can tell you that collaborating with parents is important, but if you don't believe it, then it's not going to matter. I could tell you that being flexible, right, and like sometimes you got to change your schedule to accommodate, an assembly or something. I could tell you that that's important, but if that really catches you off guard and you can't handle that, that's going to be tough to work with you. Yeah. I could teach you Common Core standards. I could teach you classroom management skills. There's plenty that you'll learn on the job. You actually alluded earlier to the new teacher that's going into the classroom. There's a million things that they're going to learn that year, and we're going to be there to support you and help you. But there are many things that I can't teach you. I just need you to have them innately.
Right. They need to come with it already.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's just who they are at their core. It's just who they are.
So let's pretend like I passed the first half.
Great.
And so now I'm one of the 300 people who applied for a position at Walden. What are some of the questions that you would ask me?
All right. So I've got 5 here that I wrote down. So tell me about a difficult circumstance that you handled. What action did you take, and what were the results?
I actually had a parent who did not like how I was using assigning reading with our district program Achieve 3000. So I have a population with about 50% students with IEPs in my classes. And so I have to break down how much reading they do per week. Because if I tell them you need to read 40 articles by the end of the semester, they'll never get there, or they'll try to read all 40 the last week before the semester. Mm-hmm. So this parent was also a teacher in the district and who didn't agree with the program. And she didn't like how I split it up because she said that it left too much for the student to have to handle and be responsible for and track. And then it also gave her homework because she had to make sure that he did it. And so it was a pretty inflammatory email, and I typically don't get those because I work well with parents. Mm-hmm. So in that situation, I didn't respond because I know that when we get these aggressions or microaggressions, we're not thinking at our best. So I did ask another colleague to take a look at it because I didn't know if it was just me reading into it and getting an emotional response for it, or if it was off base. So after we agreed that it was a little bit off base, then I sought advice from my administrator because I didn't want to respond in a way where the parent could nitpick what I was saying and use that against me. So I asked for help, and we were able to resolve it together in a diplomatic fashion. But it definitely taught me to be even more thorough in terms of, proofreading my emails, because looking back, I looked at the original email, I realized, maybe I could have worded it differently so that it would be easier to understand and so that there wouldn't be anything that might set a parent off. So I use situations like that as a learning experience in terms of how I can offer almost like better customer service with families, because I definitely want buy-in from the parents.
So I was taking notes when you were speaking. So number one, I love that it was very specific, right? It was a specific example. I can close my eyes and I can picture this email that you're getting, and I can picture you, the reaction that you had. I can picture you speaking with other teachers and your principal. It was a very good, specific, laid out example. Mm-hmm. Number two, I actually like I like your vulnerability. I'm not scared of being vulnerable in front of colleagues. I think it's actually endearing. Mm-hmm. And so I like that you were able to share it with confidence. I love that you touched on the emotionally stable response. You didn't want to just shoot off an email right away. You wanted to think about it. You knew you had to get back to her probably within 24 hours, right? The mom, but you knew that it was important to take a step back, think things through, and respond professionally. That was great. And then this is probably the biggest thing, is you touched on resolving it together with the parent. That is huge. That is so huge. We, as teachers, we can't forget that as much as we do know our kids, there's no way we'll ever know more than our parents know about their children. Right. There's just no way. And so even if you professionally disagree with a parent, they're coming at it from a perspective that you have to try to understand, and then you have to create the problem together. And I love sharing this with my new teachers. This is really good advice. When you have any parent situation, this question was asking about a difficult situation, but any parent situation, if you can create the solution together, how great, because let's say it doesn't work. Let's say the solution doesn't work. The parent can no longer be mad at you because they were a part of that solution. Right. So they could say, well, it's kind of both our faults. All right, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's figure out what else we could try now, because that didn't work. Mm-hmm. It wasn't this combative, like, well, I told you so. I told you that wasn't going to work. Right. So I guess if there was any feedback on that answer, it was a great answer. The one thing I would be looking for more evidence of is you as the teacher listening and working hard to understand the parent's perspective.
Okay.
That's not a criticism of your answer. Your answer was great. But if I was going to find anything, I would have loved to have seen you say how, look, first I have to really understand where the parent's coming from. I disagreed with them, but I really want to get their perspective on this before we move forward.
Well, and especially I can see with a newer teacher who only did student teaching and maybe haven't had that experience yet, they can also say what they would do if something like that came up.
Oh, no question. Absolutely. There's questions we ask that they might not have had that situation, but if they talk about what they would do, that's totally fine.
Oh, good. Okay.
Totally fine. Yep, absolutely. All right. What is the difference between a good teacher and a great teacher?
I think a good teacher can deliver content. They can assess their students. They understand data. They know how to run their classroom, and they'll probably have good classroom management, and they probably have good rapport in general with their colleagues, their students, and the parents. But a great teacher has this innate, I want to use your word, this innate understanding of students' needs, and they go the extra step to build rapport with the students. So it's not just, you like me as a teacher and I like you as a student, but I create an environment where you feel safe to take risks and be wrong and know that you're not going to be laughed at, you're not going to be reprimanded or humiliated by me, but I'm going to pull something from you, something out of you that you've been hiding because of past experiences, and I'm going to empower you to do things that you didn't even think you were capable of, and we're going to celebrate when you actually achieve those things.
So let me ask a follow-up.
Okay.
You talked about, I'm going to have you do things you didn't even know you were capable of. Can you tell me more about that?
Right. So a lot of students, especially because I teach English, which is reading and writing, they think that they can't write. They'll say, I suck at writing. And I get that all the time because I do a survey in the beginning of the year that asks them about their strengths and weaknesses in English language arts. And I prove to them that they don't. And I also prove to them that they can improve even more and that they can actually exceed their own expectations. That I already see that they're actually fine and that, where they're at is fine. I don't want them to feel like they're less than. I want them to feel like this is where I'm at. And guess what? I'm going to get you here and we're going to work together. And even though you don't believe you can, I'm going to show you that you can. So you didn't think that you could write a 5-paragraph essay without my help. And by the end of the grading period, all of a sudden they're doing it without my help. And I don't say, well, this isn't quite 7th grade level, but you're getting there. I just tell them, hey, you just wrote a 5-paragraph essay. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. It was, again, great answer. Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
answer. The reason I asked that follow-up, I wasn't planning on it, but because you said it, you touched on it, I just wanted to hear more. But it was a great answer. You talked about the definition of the good teacher was great. And I think the way to sum that up is if there's 300 applicants, there's 250 that are good, right? Really good. 250 that will be just fine in the classroom, and kids will like them, and parents might like the teacher, and life goes on, right? But if I'm hiring that great teacher, I love that additional explanation that you gave, and then that follow-up was key because my opinion is great teachers, they have higher expectations for their kids. And that's how you get more out of your kids. That's how you get them to do more than the kid thought they were able to do. Is that the teacher has a rigor to their class, to their lessons, and the kids get pushed harder.
Right.
That to me is a significant difference between good and great. So I think you got there.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. A student in your class consistently causes disruptions. Explain the steps you take to help the child and maintain your positive classroom environment. Considering
that I teach 7th grade, I know that when a student is consistently misbehaving, that there's something behind it. And I think a lot of teachers assume that, the student is just inherently bad. that they haven't learned right from wrong. And so I know that usually there's something going on. So they're either disengaged because they're bored, because they are hiding the fact that they don't understand and don't want to lose face, because something is going on at home and they can't concentrate, or maybe especially in 7th grade, some kind of drama at school. So rather than reprimanding them, especially in front of others, but rather than reprimanding them, I will employ things like proximity. I will walk over there, and usually if you're standing right by them, they're less likely to do something, just to sort of calm it down in the moment without having to confront them. And so I move around a lot as it is, but I will head over to their area just to get them to stop. And then when everyone is working, I'll crouch down or pull them aside, and we'll have a talk about it, because I want to get to the bottom of it. And if it's, I'm really tired. I had a game that went into overtime until 9, and then Mr. So-and-so made me do this homework, and I was up late, and I'm just having a really hard time. Or, as often is the case in my classes, I forgot to take my meds this morning and I can't concentrate. Then we talk about a way to have them redirect and find a way to get some of the assignment done and be a little bit less disruptive. And if it happens again and again, then I find that I might have to, just temporarily, without any kind of emotion, I'll relocate them and say, I think you might concentrate better over here. Let's make a better decision by going over here just for now, so you can get your work done and you won't have homework.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. So there was a really good example. That answer had more evidence of you listening to the child, like really trying to understand what was going on. Like we mentioned in the first question, your answer there got to that listening piece, which was great.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then at the end, I love how you got to the place where you're talking about helping them make better decisions in the future. Right? Like you alluded to this. Kids in general they're not misbehaving for no reason. There's something behind it. And it's our job as a teacher to figure out what that is, and then to help them make better decisions next time. Right. So I love how you got there as well. That was a great answer.
Thank you. And I also know, especially with classroom management, at the secondary level, I think we forget to teach kids how to behave. We make assumptions that by the time they get to us, they already know, they should know, the rules. That's what elementary is supposed to teach them, is how to behave. But I find that there's so much going on hormonally. There's so much going on with just that age and their development, that you have to retrain them, but in a way where they feel like they still have choice, and they feel like they still have some sense of power, because they want to be, independent, but they still want us to hold their hand. I'm sure you remember that from teaching 7th grade, where it's this weird dichotomy between those two worlds. And we have to help them navigate through that so they can be, productive students and citizens.
Absolutely. I do remember that vividly. And I'll add to that. I remember also parents would tell me a lot that they wanted 7th grade to be the year where they stopped overseeing so much, and they wanted the child to be a little bit more independent. And, it was probably a 50-50 split. There were plenty of kids who were ready for that, and they could handle school without their parents checking their backpack every night. But then there was half the kids who still needed mom and dad to be there to make sure that they were keeping up on things and getting this paper signed and doing this. And, it's that really interesting, crucial year, like you just mentioned.
Right.
Yeah. My wife teaches 8th grade, and so she talks all the time. She'll say to the kids, you guys have been in school this is your 9th year of school, kindergarten included. And pretty sure you guys know how to behave in school, right?
Right.
And then it's like, okay, good. Okay, good. Let's move on. All right. Do you believe that placing a 0 in the grade book teaches responsibility?
No, I think that a 0 is completely demoralizing, and a 0 means you know absolutely nothing about this topic. As in, you weren't here, or you purposely covered your ears while I gave instruction, or you took a nap when we were working on this. 0 means nothing. It means you know nothing. So I see zeros when placed in a grade book as a punishment. It's when teachers want to use grading to punish students for not being compliant. So that means they didn't meet the deadline, they didn't do the assignment, or it's not finished. So there have been times when I've had a student partially complete an assignment, but I didn't give them a 0 because they didn't finish it. I looked at what they did and I looked for evidence of learning and I graded them accordingly. And some teachers think, well, then what's to motivate a student to complete the assignment? And in my mind, especially let's say like science or math, if there's 50 questions and the 20 that I did demonstrate to you that I know the standard, then do you really need to give me a 0 because I didn't finish? Mm-hmm. I mean, but that's a philosophical thing.
But that's right. But yeah, that's exactly why I would ask that type of question, because most people say no to that question, which is good. But there are candidates that would say, yes, I think it's really important. It teaches them responsibility and they have to learn somehow. And, there's consequences to your actions. There are those candidates out there, but I promise you, those are not the candidates that are going to be working in my school.
Right.
They're just not. There's a million ways to teach responsibility. It does not have to be in the grade book.
Well, and right? I relate it to real life. So if I miss my flight, it doesn't mean I don't ever get to fly again. It just means that I have to pay a fee to get on the next flight. And so when people say that, you need to learn real life, well, very few times in real life, unless we're talking about 3 strikes you're out in California, I mean, very few times is it, a zero-sum game.
Right. Even our entire prison system, if you want to go to worst case scenario, it's the Department of Corrections, right? It's the whole system is about helping these criminals learn from their mistakes. Yes, there's consequences to your actions. Learn from your mistakes, though, and then don't make the mistake again. It's not like, well, you're done. Your life is over. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I obviously agree with that statement, and it actually leads in. It leads into the final question.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about it earlier. Describe your understanding of what a standards-based learning environment looks like.
Well, especially in English, with Common Core, there are quite a few standards. There's a lot to check off if you're teaching in that way. But for me, in a standards-based classroom, it's about the skills that they can apply to all of their subjects. Nothing drives me more crazy than a student who can't write a summary in science or history, even though they can write a perfect summary in my class. So for me, with my particular subject, I strive to have them demonstrate these real-life applicable skills, and also the type of analysis that makes them grow as a thinker, as a reader. So we're talking about reading analysis and even when someone's giving, for example, like an argumentative speech or a TED Talk, analyzing, the speaker's moves and their motives and biases. But overall, I want to teach them things that aren't so nitpicky with checking off boxes, but more things that are big picture. And so that's how I grade too, is I grade more holistically. So when I get an assignment, I don't check off 5 different standards. I'm focusing on maybe 1 or 2 so that I can give more effective feedback on that. And I think especially with standards-based grading, feedback is essential, because if we're grading on a scale of 1 to 4, the student needs to know why they earned a 2. Because if they were in a typical grading environment, a 2 would be, a C or a D. But to me, a 2 means you still need me to give you direction in order to complete this assignment. How can we get to a 3 where you can mostly do it on your own? So to me, that's how I do standards-based grading.
Yeah, I love it. I love how you got to the formative assessment component of that, right? Like how imperative it is that in teaching today, in classrooms today, teachers should have a pretty good understanding of where their children are at. And the hard part is, you mentioned it, it's the number of standards that exist. I'm not saying that's not easy, but the best teachers at my school can answer that. They know where their kids are at according to the various standards, and they are working very strategically and purposely to help the children on that list. I would add one thing to this isn't criticism, but just you were about to get there. You talked about like a child who has a 2 and they're getting to a 3. In my community, we're very high achieving. We've got a lot of high achieving students. And so I would add that it's prudent of me as the teacher to provide my kids the opportunity to get to the 4.
Okay.
Now what that looks like is going to be, there's a million different ways to kind of answer that question. Like, what exactly does that look like?
Right.
But, a 4 for us is exceeding the standard. It is so crucial that the teacher gives the child the opportunity to exceed. And that goes actually back to the other question about, having a rigorous learning environment. Right. I mean, I can skirt by and my kids can get 3s very easily, but do I know where their ceiling is? Do I know how high they can go? Because I've given them those opportunities. The answer to that question is really important.
I think with my particular grading scale, and the reason why I said a 2 to a 3, and maybe, well, actually, it doesn't have anything to do with that. But with my grading scale, a 4 is actually grade level for me. And I do this because at the middle school level, it's a mind thing. And the parents don't know that there is a such thing for me as a 4+, which means exceeding. But the problem with standards-based grading isn't necessarily the teachers, it's the parents and their beliefs from how they were graded. And so they put an unnecessary amount of pressure and create anxiety and depression in their students because their students can't get a 4 in elementary school because 4 means exceeding. So if they can meet grade level standard for me, I give them a 4. But especially for my accelerated students, they would get a 4+, and it takes the pressure off of the students because now their parents aren't hounding them. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like I had to adjust that because I just couldn't train the parents. It is what it is, and I'm Filipino, and I had parents who were always trying to extract the best from me that way, and there's also competition among my peers, and students now have anxiety more than ever. So I try to mitigate that with my grading system.
Yeah. That's great. So, and that's a core difference between our system. The 4 here stands for exceeding standards.
Right.
A 3 is meeting, and then a 2 and a 1 are variations of not yet meeting the standard.
It's actually that way at the elementary school that feeds into my district as well. So I made that switch because the kids were talking about how they were being pressured by their parents to get 4s all the time, and especially in middle school because a 4 means A to them. They are attaching percentages and letter grades to that grading scale, which drives me crazy.
Well, it's true, and there's an unlearning component that our kids have to go through as well. Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah.
Well, thank you. I hope I did okay.
You did great. You did great. Absolutely. You did wonderful. Absolutely. No question.
So if this is something that's up someone's alley who's listening to this episode, where can they find more information about your district? dps109.org. Okay. Every school has promotional videos, which I highlight only because I think they do a great job of showing, what we're all about and the specific culture of each school. But yeah, DPS stands for Deerfield Public Schools, so dps109.org. You can also check out #Engage109 on Twitter. Everyone uses it from our district when they're tweeting. It's the portal to see, everything about our district. We've had it for about 5 years now, and it is really, it's really successful. I mean, every teacher in our district, it's just every tweet that they post goes to #Engage109. Now, a lot of our schools also have school hashtags. So, for example, #WAL109, WAL109. My school is Walden. So, the teachers here, every time they tweet, same with me, they tweet out and then they say #Engage109, #WAL109. Again, WAL109. So that's happened at the school level. And then what's really neat is teachers have taken that to the next level.
and they'll create a class hashtag.
Oh.
Their parents love that because they can go to that hashtag and there's a pretty good chance that they'll see their kid, on Twitter. So it's pretty cool.
And then how about for yourself? Where can they find you?
I'm at Scott Schwartz, so at SCASCHWA.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
That's on Twitter.
I'll make sure to put that in my show notes so that if any of my listeners want to reach out to you, they can.
Thank you.
So
thank you
again, and congratulations on your amazing promotion. I can already tell that your district is amazing, so I can't wait to see what else you're going to do to push them even more into being innovative.
I really appreciate you reaching out. It was fun.
I think we can all agree that there was so much value in my interview with Scott. We were both very open and honest and very real about why we think that things need to change in education and how we have to unlearn a lot of things and how we can move forward to do what's best for students. And really, that's what this is all about, is what is the best for students and maybe not necessarily what is the easiest for teachers. So here are my key takeaways from this interview. First, with the right leadership, it is possible for an entire district to embrace forward thinking and change. Not necessarily change for the sake of it, but one that can move students forward in terms of academic growth. Also, there are objective and database methods to select an ideal candidate for a school. While Deerfield Public Schools has a very rigorous application process, I want you guys to know that it's just one possible way to hire teachers, so I don't want you to get discouraged if you don't think you'd pass through that process. Remember, this is just one district of many in our country. It's definitely good and important to get to know the ethos and culture of the district in which you're applying. So in Deerfield Public Schools, they are completely standards-based. So that's something that you'd want to know ahead of time because you want to be sure that it aligns with your own core beliefs, or you have to be willing to be flexible and adapt. Finally, in order for real change and progress to happen in our schools, we're going to have to unlearn how things have always been done. It takes an honest and open-minded conversation with your peers and with the community to reach a consensus on what is the best course of action for students. So I really hope that you got a lot of value out of today's interview. My mind was just blown away by everything that we discussed, and I know that I also learned a lot, and it affirmed a lot of the beliefs that I already had. So I really appreciate you listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. I'm having a great time with this series, and I hope that you're enjoying it. And if you wanted to see the questions that Scott asked me, you can head over to teachersneedteachers.com/11. And also, if you want to discuss anything that we went over, like standards-based grading or their interview process, I encourage you to head over to my Facebook group, and you can just search Teachers Need Teachers in Facebook, or you can go to teachersneedteachers.com/FB. And also, if you did really like this, if you could please leave a review and a rating over in Apple Podcasts and let me know how it went. Let me know what you think of this series so far so that if you think there's something I need to work on, I could make it better for you. I do this for you guys, for my listeners, because I want you to not only get the best teaching job, but also succeed in the beginning of your teaching career. So please feel free to leave feedback, a rating, and a review over in Apple Podcasts, and let me know how I can make this fit better for you. Also, if you have any suggestions, any questions, or you're like, you know what, I want to be a guest on your podcast, please email me at kim@teachersneedteachers.com. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.